Welcome back. We are here for another episode of the Up Until Now No Name podcast. So I am so excited to welcome our guest for today, Stephen Courtney. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, it's good to be here, man. It's good to see you.
I'm a little jealous of the backdrop. I'm not going to lie. Like it might look like this is professional, but I'm literally like in a cave in my garage. But you have like this grandiose fireplace mantle behind you. So well done.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Just for you.
Well, I know that I sprung this on you not too long ago about being involved, but I feel like not only has the organization of Standing Stone grown so much and we have so many new people, but I know enough that I'm aware that your role has adjusted quite a bit recently. And in a moment here, I want to hear all about that, but not before. I just want you to know how much fun I've had getting to know you over the last few years and some of the gatherings. When was it that we first met? I know it was at your training, but where did we do that training?
We did it in Tennessee, and
Was that in the barn or
that
the
was in the
church?
barn.
It
That
was in
was
the
in the
barn. Okay.
Yeah, that was the first time we met in person. Of course, we had some calls and some Zoom calls and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But yeah, man, I was in the barn.
That is wild. And then we had a chance to see each other most recently at the regional gathering a year ago,
Yeah,
2025.
for the South region up at in Fort Worth, Texas, and so I got to see you there and a lot of other great people. So yeah,
So
it was
good.
yeah.
So good. Well, I want to hear not only for my, maybe even things that I've learned for the first time, but for the sake of our audience, our fellow shepherds out there, I would love for you to break down for us. One, you kind of tipped it off where you live, but then what does your current role within Standing Stone look like?
Yeah. So I live in Lufkin, Texas, which most people don't know where that's at, but here in Texas, but we're over on the east side of the state in deep East Texas. And I live about 2 hours north of Houston, about an hour and a half south of Tyler. And man, we've lived here for about 11 years and came on staff at a church here 11 years ago. And then it was about, oh man, 3.5 years ago that I joined Standing Stone back in 2022, in the fall of 2022. And man, it's been incredible. I've just loved this ministry and just blessed to hang out with just the incredible people, the shepherds, and
Yeah.
the leadership is just top notch. And yeah, I started fundraising, yeah, in the fall too. And then in July of 2023, I started shepherding, jumped in, got funded, and got shifted from the West region to the South region because in that time frame we grew as we continue to grow, but it was just West and East at the time. And then I was with Todd.
Did you start as a level one or did you know you were level two out of the gate?
I was going for level 2 out of the gate. Yeah, I was doing my best to get up to level 2, knew that I wanted to do level 2, and so just went after it, man. And God's been incredible, and He was faithful through that roller coaster ride of fundraising, and He showed up and showed off like He always does, and it's been awesome. He's been faithful ever since. So yeah, it's been great.
Well, as the partner development took shape and came to its fruition, and then you started caring for pastors, my understanding is that even in the last 6 months, not only the structure of the organization has shifted, but your particular participation in that structure. What's happened in the last 6 months as it relates to you in the role?
Yeah, so after about 6 months, 8 months of being a shepherd in the South region, I got the privilege of being an area leader within the
Yep.
South region under Dave and Sandy Hastings, which was awesome. I was a South Central area leader for, I don't know, a little over a year. And then this fall, as we continued to grow, they decided to add a fourth region, which is the Southwest region, which is Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, Utah. Think I got them all. And that's our new Southwest region that just kicked off at the beginning of the year. And I'm excited to be the new regional director for that and getting to meet all these new friends out West in those 4 states that I
Yeah.
had connected to. And I've been spending the last couple months doing Zoom calls, getting to know them. And man, just excited to do that role and to see this new region kick off and start growing.
Well, that's no easy task. So for the people that don't have a regular connection point to how we're structured, your area is kind of, not only is it a brand new region, but you, I think, only had one other area leader that was kind of allocated. No, that's a terrible term, reallocated. Somebody else whose location moved into your new region who has experience. So other than that, there's really just two of you who have been area leaders that are now part of that, and you just identified and invited in a third. You're building a new region with basically new people, and that is wild. What would you say to throw you into the mix, what would you say is the daunting aspect of building something new like that?
Yeah, I think just identifying those leaders of leaders.
Mm,
David Drosty's that new leader that came from the West region. He's
yeah,
just blessing and working with the Arizona, Colorado Shepherds. At our last training, just a week or so ago, we just added our first ever Utah Shepherd, so we're excited about that.
crazy.
So we got one in Utah, so we're already growing that. But yeah, I think identifying leaders and trying to figure out how to split this up. We actually took the other part of our region, and Ryan Gentles, he was a guy that I was already working with through our leadership development process, and he's become our South Texas and Louisiana area leader. Yeah, and in the meantime, I'm doing North Texas and Oklahoma, so kind of doing double duty between regional and area. And so I'm taking some other shepherds right now, right off the bat, through the leadership development process. So yeah, and I think another daunting part is like New Mexico, for example. We have no shepherds in New Mexico, so it's
Hmm,
praying about, okay, how do we get into New Mexico? How do we build some relationships? How do I lean into some already relationships that I have
yeah.
through churches or denominational friendships, relationships, so we can identify some future shepherds in New Mexico and start growing this new region. So yeah, I think those are some of the daunting things, and don't know what I don't know, but I'm learning. And we've got some incredible other regional directors that have been doing it for a while that are allowing me to call them and ask great questions.
Well, you sounds like you've got that famous Tornado Alley is where
Yeah,
you get
I do.
to be a shepherd. But hey, what a great metaphor! Because I mean, a lot of the things that we get involved in are the storms that pastors meet, and I know that you have the Hastings, which kind of mentored you as their area leader, who are also in that northwest part of Arkansas, that can shed a lot of light. I think for just in that brief explanation, things that I would like to highlight for the rest of our shepherds are that. Well, let me ask you this way: how long did you campaign to be a leader in Standing Stone? How long did you didn't campaign?
No, not at all.
Oh,
I
that's
didn't
right.
I didn't get into this to do that. So
Right. Nobody, if you're listening out there, the fastest way to get unconsidered for a role is to petition and campaign for a leadership role. I don't know of anyone in the entire org who's like, "Hey, I'm going to go campaign to be that leader in that role." It is always a identifying of peers and and being recommended and then being invited into that role. And I really want all of our shepherds to know that because on one hand, you guys out there in the podcast world, you're all here because we have utmost confidence in your ability to shepherd other shepherds. But we also know that a lot of you either have the gift of leadership or were asked to lead at a high capacity, and we'll find you. If that's something that you have ambitions to be involved in these higher roles, focus on that shepherding and let your area leader and your regional director notice you and invite you into it, because we are growing and we're still doing that. Another thing that you brought up, I think it's important to note, is just how important the referral side of identifying great candidates for shepherding is. I was talking to Kyle Rutkin, our marketing and basically a recruitment guy, and he was saying that almost half of our shepherds now come through referrals internally, like people in Standing Stone referring people that we know. And so if you do know folks, not just in New Mexico, Utah, and in Stevens region. But if you know people like, you know what, they would be really great at that, then by all means reach out to them and have a preliminary conversation, and then reach out to me on how to connect them. But you do have a daunting task in building that region. But at the same time, you wouldn't be in the role if you weren't recognized as being capable. And so I'm super pumped to see what God does with your efforts.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I'm excited, dude. Just incredible. The whole organization's awesome, but man, the people I'm getting to meet in this new region, and they're awesome. We're excited.
Now, you had mentioned you didn't get into this role for the leadership place that you have right now. In those months and years prior to becoming the regional director, what is it that you've loved about your role as shepherd in particular?
Yeah, man, I think all of us can say as shepherds, and everyone listening would probably have a moment or two or three or four or 12 of times when we were struggling in ministry. We were walking through a difficult season, a difficult time, a transition, or whatever it may be. And I think the biggest one for me was, I remember, 2013, I just resigned from being a senior pastor. And it was At that moment, a buddy of mine gave me a job at a plant north of town to pick up trash. That was my job. I mean, I got a job for you. You're not going to like it, but it's what it is. And I took it, wanting to take care of my family. And so I walked around this plant crying, angry at God, trying to figure out what do I do now and why were you having me resign at that moment, not realizing that I was completely burned out. And I just felt very isolated and alone. And I remember making the statement as I walked through that plant that God, pastors are going to go through seasons like this. I just don't want them to go through it alone. And that's
Wow.
where God really planted the seed in me that one day I want to do something with this. I tried to push some doors open through the next few years after that. I tried to pry some doors open, but it wasn't time. And God just continued to walk me and my family through some local church ministry stuff, moved us here to Lufkin, Texas 11 years ago to a really great, healthy church. But I have a great pastor who I would tell him about my dream, my heart to do something for pastors. And he was very supportive. And then it was in 2021 that I found out about Standing Stone. And so I say all that to just say that, like, it's just that knowing that I get to be a part of this opportunity to do exactly what I was begging for in 2013. And that's to have somebody just walk with me and help me through that difficult season. And we get to do that. We get to lock arms with these pastors and couples and ministry leaders that feel so alone and just be there for them and not necessarily have all the answers. We're not expected to have all the answers, but God does give us answers to give them or direction or some encouragement, some resources. But at the end of the day, it's just walking with them for the long haul, whatever God takes them and sticking by their side. So that I just love that. I love that I finally, after all those years of trying to bust some doors open, when I just submitted to, okay, God, it's all in your hands and it's your plan, it worked out in his perfect timing.
Man, that has to be surreal on a certain, like, when you look back at these big markers of, like, not only how he heard you, but how he heard you and put you in a position that you didn't even know existed, and now to be, from what I can tell, really thriving in all elements of life in a way that you probably weren't experiencing in traditional brick and mortar church.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember thinking, like, do I have to buy property one day? Like, I'm never going to be able to afford property, like to have a place for pastors to come, which I think is awesome, and I just want to love on, and I would think about all these things I wanted to do. And I would look at the story of Elijah. That was my story I held on to when he defeated the prophets of Baal and God defeated them through him. And in the very next chapter, he runs for his life and he's just done. He's in rest and refreshment and the resources that he needed at the moment. I was like, that's what I want to do, God. And then all of a sudden to come to find out about Standing Stone and see that I don't have to go buy this organization provides all of that. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. That's what I want to be a part of. And the more my wife and I prayed about it, the more we're like, yeah, let's jump in, let's do this.
How so I'm glad you brought that up because we as shepherds might be shepherding alone, but we're not doing this alone. How has being involved in Standing Stone changed your family's life for the positive? How has it blessed your family?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that comes to my mind when you ask that is just, when you're in God's will and you are living in your passion and what you feel like God's built you for, and brought you through all these different experiences and set you up for this moment, and you're walking in obedience and what God's called you to do. It's not only peace for me, it's peace for my wife, it's peace for my kids and my home. I've just always believed that obedience is a key that unlocks incredible blessing in every area of our lives. And I'll be honest, like that last year before I joined, I was scared. I was like, of course, scared of the fundraising, scared of like being, this season of life with a daughter who was a junior in high school. I'm like, I'm gonna walk away from a salary and raise my funds before she goes to college. Like this doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. And I just remember thinking, okay, my delayed obedience is disobedience. And I just knew that I got to do this. And it was partly my wife looking at me and saying, hey, you love this church, you love your pastor, you're loyal to a fault, but you're miserable because you're not doing what you're called to do in this new season. And it's like, you're right. And so I think once I did that, took that step, it's brought peace over my family. I really think. And it's been awesome. I love it.
So good. So good. I want to go back because you had this thought early on, but you really didn't have any history in kind of a shepherd, pastoring pastors. In fact, you probably needed a Standing Stone shepherd more as you're doing loops in that vocational job. But at what point and what did you notice about your own personal shepherding style? Fast forward, you're a shepherd now, you're caring for folks. Did anything stand out to you that you realized, like, wow, this is really a unique ability that I have in this context that seems to be really well received? Like, what was your gifting in that role, if you can identify any?
Yeah, I think, I'm definitely a shepherd and pastor shepherd at heart. That was always just the caring heart that I had. In fact, the last 8 years on staff at the church here I'm at, I mean, I oversaw care for our church and oversaw a lot of staff as an executive pastor and then as a campus pastor. And I got more joy, I think, a lot of the times in my one on ones with staff over
Hmm.
time. Like when I would sit down with them and not talk to them so much about nuts and bolts of ministry, but it was like, how are you doing? How are you doing personally? And what struggles are you having right now? And that brought so much joy to me. So I started realizing that. And I think just over time and all the experiences and hats that I've worn in ministry, God's just built up on me an opportunity and a gifting to just like we all need to do, listen well and find this connection point and just whoever I'm sitting with, helping them know they're loved, they're known, and they're not alone. And whether it was a staff person or whether it's a pastor or ministry leader now that I get to serve. So yeah,
Well, one thing that I noticed about you in our times together is I feel like we're contemporaries. I'm not going to ask you your age, but I'm 51. I feel like we're cut from the same cloth. And at full admission, like, as a young minister coming up when I was 30, like, I was really intimidated by what I would call the higher capacity leaders. And I was like, man, I don't know that I could ever, and it created an insecurity in me. But what I noticed about you is that there's a blend of, here's somebody who knows what they're doing and has a great deal of experience, but there's no intimidation factor. So I can only imagine that the people that you care for also have a sense of, like, man, this is somebody that I not only feel safe talking to, but I feel probably has been through it, to where anything I bring up to them, that you're going to have some relevant wisdom relating to it. And so I've always appreciated about that in you. And I think that's probably the reason you're in the regional role, is because you bring that experience in such a safe environment.
appreciate that. Yeah, I mean yeah, making people feel safe and known and loved. I mean that's what I want. You know what I mean? And so whether it's a shepherd on our team in our region, or whether it's that pastor ministry leader that I get to care for. So
Well, and in the course of caring for people, you know as well as I do, you get put into some really interesting shepherding dynamics.
yeah.
And I don't know if you have any that really stick out to you as what I would say is doozies, but do you think can you think of any shepherding situations that were particularly unique, memorable, or hard? And would you mind sharing with us so we can kind of learn with how you navigated?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had some doozies so far. I mean, I've had some good ones that have been challenging and tough. I would say probably one of the harder ones that's turned out, it was just amazing to watch what God did through the whole situation and how he took care of this individual. He was a young youth pastor up in North Texas in a small town. And I'd been shepherding him for probably 6 to 8 months. And man, basically at the start of the year, a couple years ago, gosh, it would have been the beginning of 2025, he had that conversation with a pastor and a deacon in his church. They sat him down and said, "Hey, we're gonna have you resign. We're done." Basically, got rid of him. And young guy, young family, 4 kids, all under the age of 10, a wife, lived in a
Man,
parsonage, and it was one of those stories where it was like, you get one more paycheck, and you're in the parsonage, and you got to be out in 3 to 4 weeks. And he was like, "Man, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm gonna do." I talk about that shepherding, caring heart, which I have, and sometimes you have to manage that emotion. Like, I was just like, I
uh-huh.
hear my wife, I'm like, "I love this guy." No, I guess knowing he was just a few hours north of me, I was trying to find him a job here in Lufkin. I was trying to talk to my pastor because I still attend the church there. I'm like, "What could we do to help this family?" And it was just neat to watch how God, that was a very challenging season, but to watch them walk through it and watch God provide at the last moment. They began to interview with some churches. I didn't have all the answers for them, but it was just the consistent calls and saying, I'm here for you." It was
Yeah.
first Sunday that he wasn't supposed to be at church was Super Bowl Sunday. And I invited them down and they drove down. I said, "Hey, I want do you feel comfortable coming to church and just sit with me and my wife? Your kids can go to our kids ministry. I want to take you to lunch. I'll fill you up with gas. I don't want this to cost you anything. And they did. And they came to church that Sunday, and the wife just cried all through the
Mm.
service because she could just tell she was hurting. And we just, my wife and I just walked with this young couple and their family and tried to connect them as much as we could. And they ended up, being able to interview. And right at the last, I'd say 6 weeks later, when they were going to probably move to Arkansas to her family's home and not know what to do, a couple churches reached out. And as they just trusted the Lord, God opened the door for them about a month or two later in the Fort Worth area. And they're at a great church. They're thriving. They're just doing great. The wife is thriving and doing ministry stuff too, as well. So it was just so awesome to, go through that, because we know transition happens in ministry. Sometimes we get to pray about it slowly and say, okay, God, I'm feeling a transition here. But sometimes it just comes kicking through the door like it did for them and out of their control, and they're getting let go. They don't understand why. And it's so painful and hurtful. That's probably one of the biggest things I love about shepherding is being there for pastors through the transition. It's just whether it's difficult like that, or I've had some pastors where they're like, "Hey, I'm feeling change and I just don't know what to do." Okay, well, let's speak that. Let's start praying about it. Let's help you, with that. And so I've been able to help a pastor that went on a sabbatical, and during his sabbatical helped him plan it. And part of that was a spiritual retreat where he focused in on some things. And sure enough, a couple months later, he was saying, okay, I think it's time for me to become a lead pastor. He was a staff pastor, and it was a smooth, awesome transition. So, but that one with this other young couple, it was difficult. It was hard. My heart broke for them, but it was just awesome to watch God be so faithful and take care of them as
Well,
well.
the ministry trajectory is so fascinating because I'm sure in our logical right frame of mind, if we said, "Hey, you're not going to be pastoring at this church for the rest of your life. Do you understand that?" They're like, "Oh yeah, for sure."
Yeah.
When it gets into, "Oh, then what? But what does the transition look like?" And, because to your point, oftentimes we have very little control over that. And even though in our minds we can say, of course, I wasn't going to be at that church forever, we also want to have a very loud voice into how does the change happen. And in a short turn around like that, it's such a balancing act of what I would consider like the 29:11, for Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, and you wanting to build hope, but then be also say like, but that was a generational promise, not a next week promise. So he might have you here for a while in walking in the uncertainty of Babylon, and he might have you here for a while walking the uncertainty of the Exodus. So, but we don't want to be disingenuous or insensitive to their situation, to where it's like, well, I'm sure if you pray about it hard enough, it's going to work itself out. It's like,
That's right.
yes, but their whole lives are decimated, right? Like, and I love that you guys got to love on the wife too, because so often they are front row participants but have no input in the ebb and flow of the tide, the surges that their family goes through.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they will never forget that Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm working with another couple right now where it's kind of a restoration process that I was
Yeah.
invited to be a part of by a pastor in a denomination. And I'm working with the husband, but the wife and the kids, they have 3 girls, and there's nothing for the wife, there's nothing for the girls. And so I've been able to introduce a female shepherd to the wife, and I just love that our organization provides that as well. And because yeah, a lot of times there's this focus on the minister, which is it's needed. Like a lot of times the wife and the family get left behind and don't get the love and the time that they need as well.
Correct.
So yeah.
Well, if I'm doing the math, you have been with Standing Stone for 4 years,
It'll be 4 years in the fall. So like yeah, like 3.5 years.
3.5.
Yeah.
So if you could go back, knowing what you know now,
Yeah.
sitting here in 2026, and you could have an audience with yourself back in the fall of 2022, what advice would you give yourself?
I think, when I got started, and I'm sure every shepherd feels this, it's like, do I have what it takes to like say the right thing and to give the right answers and help this minister or that minister when I start shepherding? And I think understanding that like it's all about listening, just relax.
Yeah.
and lean on the Holy Spirit to help you in those moments. I love the emphasis of prayer that Standing Stone has to just lean into every meeting that we have with a pastor or ministry leader, because you want the Lord to speak into that moment. And if we listen well and we relax and just trust the Lord, He's called us to this, because I remember early on thinking, man, I was really amped up and excited, but also nervous, like, okay, I got to have all the answers. Well, no, not really. Sometimes just being quiet and listening well and just sitting with them in that moment and then just trusting the Lord. And because there's so many times I'll walk away from a Zoom call or a face-to-face meeting and I'm like, wow, thank you, God, because that was you. That was
Yep.
give me that little insight, or you helped me remember that scripture or that moment that I went through or something that I read that really made this particular meeting so valuable for that guy, for that pastor, for that couple. And so I would probably tell myself, hey, just relax. God's got this. He's called you to it, and He's going to, just like He's provided financially for you to do this, He's going to provide what you need in every meeting. In fact, if you try to do it yourself, it's not going to turn out very well. So,
No. I'm so glad you brought that up because, as part of my role is I get to be the introductory call for people who are curious about becoming shepherds. And one of the questions that they always have is like, what training are we going to be provided? And it's one of those where I have to really temper my answer because I'm like, if you needed to be trained, we wouldn't invite you in. Like,
that's right. Yeah.
your role as being a leader in a church or nonprofit for more than 7 years is all the qualifications that you need, and you've already been doing this work. But where there's a weird shift is they think oftentimes that somehow shepherding is different because we're shepherding pastors. And it's like, not really. Like, not really. The only difference is that a lot of the pastors that I work with, just by speaking their struggles out loud, can oftentimes catch themselves and be like, I've never heard myself say that, and almost self advise what to do. But because the trials and the struggles have been ping ponging a ball around in their brain, like lotto balls, it's so hard for them to identify and fix or at least find relief in one of those situations. In a lot of ways, I find what we do super easy, but it's because it's easy depending on our ability to practice that presence and be listening in that presence. But if we get good at that, I think that this role is probably the easiest from a process standpoint. It's hard because of the spiritual weight that we carry. It's hard because of the situations we get invited to. But
Yeah.
there's nothing revolutionary about how to help these men and women regain traction and find a path to health. And so I'm glad that you brought it up. And I think that's probably good for anyone listening out there. We are not reinventing the wheel. We are just making ourselves available to a different demographic of the church that, quite frankly, has no one to talk to because they're so isolated.
Yeah. I'll never forget a pastor that I meet with every month in a town about 3 hours away. Great guy. And we've been meeting for like a year, talking about all kinds of stuff. And I walked in one day, we walked in a coffee shop and he said, hey, before we get started, can we just talk about college football today? Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about college football. And that's all we talked about that day. Now, we don't do that every meeting, but for on that day, that's what he needed. He was like, I just
Yeah.
want to talk about church stuff today. And I'm like, hey, man,
No.
I get it. I totally understand. And man, he's a Texas fan, and I'm a Texas A&M fan, and we just talked
Woo.
college football for the time we were together, and had a great time. And it was what he needed that day. And so,
Those
I
aren't
try
always safe conversations where you live. Like
this state.
those conferences, big, historic, proud teams, depending on what colors you wear, could get you into
That's
some
right.
fights.
That's for sure.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I appreciate the time. One of the things I've been doing for everyone on the podcast, because this is brand new. We really don't have a name for it. So we're going to be polling all of our guests like yourself, and then we're going to take like the top 3 to 5 potential podcast names, and then we're going to throw it out there to the greater Standing Stone population and have a vote. So I'm curious, after now experiencing this, do you have any possible names that you could put on this extremely professional, extremely well produced podcast?
Man, that's tough. How about Low and Friends?
This is the problem, is this is not it needs to transcend any individual because who knows what we'll be doing the podcast in a year.
That's right, that's right. I like, how about I thought about the green room, and the
Mm,
reason I think that is, Psalm 23. green pastures, that whole idea, and what we do as shepherds, and we get to shepherd the shepherds. That's a thought, you
But
know.
also, that was the spiritual aspect of the green room. It's
Sure.
also where a lot of pastors isolate to
That's
stay
true.
away from their congregations before and after their sermons.
Right.
So I
How
like
about
that profound part of it.
yeah, how about built to shepherd?
Built to shepherd. I like that.
That's the best I got today, man.
Hey, those are better than some. I won't tell you whose were the lamest, but there were a couple lame ones. But it wasn't yours if you're listening. It wasn't yours. That's great, buddy. Well, I'll throw those into the loop and see if any of them get traction from the greater population. But thanks again for being willing to jump on this and share a little glimpse into your unique journey within Standing Stone. And I appreciate you being here today.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for letting me do it.
You bet. We'll see you soon.
All right.